The marble corridors of the Capitol were unnervingly quiet that evening. Outside, Washington's July heat pressed heavy against the windows, thick with the scent of distant storms and unrest. But inside room 211, tucked beneath layers of bureaucracy and fading portraits of long-dead lawmakers, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat alone beneath the yellow glare of a desk lamp. Her hands were still, her breath measured. And yet, everything in her eyes screamed. Before her lay a redacted copy of the Epstein files. Hundreds of pages of legal fog, names blacked out, details obscured, timelines shattered by bureaucracy. It was a graveyard of stories. The kind that never made it to courtrooms. The kind that died in the quiet, forgotten spaces between money and memory. Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned in closer, scanning the pattern of redactions like a puzzle. The pattern was deliberate, strategic. But whoever had done it, they hadn't done it well enough. A scribbled note from an internal memo stood out. Coordinate with PB, she handled the optics. PB Pam Bondi, a former Florida Attorney General? A public figure turned political commentator. A woman who had, until now, never been questioned. Never pressed. Never forced to answer in a space she couldn't control. Jasmine reached for her pen, circled the initials slowly, then underlined them twice. Her hands were steady. Her voice low, barely audible. Optics won't save you this time. On a nearby corkboard, a photo was pinned with a single tack slightly crooked from the weight of time. A girl, brown eyes. 13, maybe 14? The smile was strained, like she'd been asked to smile too many times in one lifetime. Her name was Leila Martinez. Disappeared in 2004, listed in the sealed documents under Case 3.07-CV-118. No resolution. No trial, just silence, Jasmine whispered. The name aloud, Lila. The air shifted. Something ancient and righteous stirred in her bones. This wasn't about party lines. Not anymore. This wasn't about liberal or conservative. This was about a system that had built palaces on the backs of invisible children. She stood, the sound of her chair scraping across the tile echoed too loud in the room, like a gavel slammed where no judge yet sat. There would be hearings, there would be subpoenas. And if the halls of Congress weren't ready to speak the names, she would, because silence had already buried too many girls, and tomorrow, she'd start with one question. Why was Pam Bondi ever in those files at all? Asterisk. Morning light sliced through the blinds of the Judiciary Oversight Chamber like a scalpel. Cameras clicked, coffee cups steamed, and the air buzzed with anticipation and artificial civility. A routine session, or so it was meant to be. Pam Bondi was trending again, another primetime appearance, another deflection wrapped in charm. On screen, she'd laughed off Epstein questions like they were amateur gossip. Old news, she said. I was never involved. She had the nation believing her, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't the nation. She was a woman who had read too many sealed files, met too many broken families, and held too many photographs of daughters turned into missing persons reports. And this morning, she was ready to change the narrative. Gavel slammed. Today's committee session will begin. Crockett didn't wait. She rose slowly from her seat, documents in hand. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the room like glass. Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Title 18, Section 6002, I move to issue a formal subpoena for former Florida Attorney General Pamela Jo Bondi to appear before this committee and testify under oath regarding her knowledge of sealed Epstein files. The room cracked open. Chairs shifted. Staffers looked up. A junior clerk dropped his phone. Even the chairman blinked like he hadn't heard correctly. A pause. Congresswoman Crockett, is this a personal motion? It's a legal one, she replied, and it's long overdue. Gasps murmured through the chamber as reporters scrambled. Phones lit up like fireworks. Pam Bondi's name hadn't been spoken in this room in years, certainly not like this. Somewhere across town, Bondi was mid-interview, micked up for a cheerful segment about political strategy. Her earpiece crackled as a producer's voice broke in. Crockett just filed a subpoena. It's single quotes S. for you. Bondi froze, blinking hard. What did you say? The camera kept rolling. Her smile faltered for just a second, just long enough to be noticed. Back in the chamber, the chairman hesitated, tapping his gavel nervously. Congresswoman, are you prepared to provide cause? Jasmine didn't flinch. She slid a stack of documents across the table. She was mentioned in over 3 separate internal memos, including coordination on evidence classification. That's enough cause for every mother who never got to bury her daughter. Silence. The chairman glanced at his aides, then back at her. There was no stopping this now. Not without a political earthquake. The motion is entered into the record. Outside, the press exploded. Inside, Jasmine lowered herself slowly into her seat. She could feel the shift in the room, the quiet dread settling on every face who knew what this meant. She had just cracked the door. Now Bondi would have to walk through it whether she wanted to or not. Pam Bondi smiled for the cameras as if nothing had changed. The Fox studio lights bathed her in a soft, forgiving glow, the kind that blurred the edges, concealed fatigue, and turned even discomfort into elegance. She was a practiced public figure after all. Years of crisis management had trained her to handle any scandal with a smile, a subtle deflection, and a dash of charm. But charm wouldn't save her tonight. As soon as the segment wrapped and the crew moved on to the next guest, Bondi pulled the mic cord from beneath her blouse with one swift, irritated tug. She didn't wait for the assistant producer. She didn't smile. Her phone buzzed again, text from her legal advisor. We need to talk. You've been officially subpoenaed. It's not going away. She read it twice, then deleted it. Back in her private office, far from the makeup chairs and polished surfaces, Bondi opened a drawer, slid out an old manila envelope, and laid it flat on her desk. Inside were a handful of documents she'd kept since her last term as egg-classified memos, donor correspondence, legal evaluations tied to Epstein's initial immunity deal in Florida. Her name wasn't central, but it was there, in the margins, in the language of delegation. In the silence between decisions, she pulled out a folded letter. A typed briefing from 2007, top of page, private coordination with federal partners to ensure optical containment of high-profile clientele. Optical containment? She remembered the meeting, the men in suits, the glass of wine she hadn't wanted, the unspoken understanding that some names wouldn't survive exposure, that the legal system wasn't built to touch those at the top. A tremor ran through her hand. Just for a moment. Then she lit a match and fed the corner of the letter to the flame. The paper curled, darkened, and whispered away into ash. Bondi walked out onto her private balcony, phone pressed to her ear. After 2 rings, someone picked up. No name. Just a deep breath on the other end. She's coming for me, she said. Crockett, the voice was low, deliberate. Do you want this to disappear quietly? Bondi looked out over the still waters of the bay. Her reflection stared back from the glass door behind her, beautiful, poised, and terrified. No, she said at last. I want her buried. Back in Washington, Jasmine Crockett stared at the photo of Lila Martinez still pinned to her corkboard. There were no flames in her office, just cold clarity and a rising tide of rage. The system was reacting. That meant she had touched something real. Bondi could burn the papers, but she couldn't burn the dead. Asterisk. The Capitol parking garage was nearly empty, just the occasional hum of a government sedan and the echo of Jasmine's footsteps as she descended the concrete ramp. She wore no security detail, no aides, no entourage. Just a long black coat and her own anger, which walked beside her like a shadow. She had received the text only an hour earlier. I don't trust email. Meet me where the senators park. Level B3, 10 p.m. Ask for Thomas. A risk? Yes, but silence had already cost too much. The man leaned against a concrete pillar, half hidden in the dim yellow of a flickering overhead light. Mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, a Department of Justice badge that he didn't flash but let slip just long enough for her to catch. A career bureaucrat, too low-level to be protected, too ethical to keep sleeping. He handed her a USB drive. This wasn't meant to survive the shredders, he said. It's unedited surveillance footage. Miami compound, 2005 through 2007. There's more if you can shield me. Jasmine didn't ask how he got it. She didn't want to know. Did Bondi know? She asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. They all knew. The girls were brought in the back underage. Undocumented, untraceable. Some were groomed through political events, fundraisers, private retreats. One of the coordination liaisons worked in the Florida Ag's office. Jasmine's heart seized. She whispered, "Name?" He nodded. Bondi's former deputy? But she signed off on the expense accounts. Oversight, they called it. She stared at the USB in her palm. It felt heavier than metal, like it was made of bones. Outside, thunder rumbled low in the sky. Distant but coming. Back in her apartment that night, she locked the door and sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, curtains drawn tight. She hesitated for a full minute. Before double-clicking the folder, what she saw first was a hallway, carpeted dim, a camera tilted slightly sideways, capturing the grainy image of a teenage girl being led into a side room by two men in suits. No sound. No struggle, but her eyes. Jasmine leaned in, froze the frame. The girl's face was partially turned toward the camera. Her expression was blank, but her eyes screamed. It was Lila. The same girl from the photo. Jasmine recoiled, covering her mouth with one hand. Her vision blurred. The screen kept playing, as if unaware it was unspooling hell. She slammed the laptop shut, and she wept. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because it confirmed everything she feared and more. She rose and walked slowly to the window, staring out at the Capitol dome in the distance, lit like a monument to justice. But she knew the truth now. That dome had protected monsters. And in 72 hours, she would walk into a hearing and name one of them. Pam Bondi, *, 3 days. Later, the committee chamber was packed. It wasn't just the usual press and policy aides anymore. Survivors had started showing up. So had advocates, watchdog groups, and even a few stone-faced interns who looked too young to understand the weight of what was unfolding, but too haunted to look away. Pam, Bondi's legal team, had arrived early. They swept through the chamber like royalty returning to a palace they assumed still bowed to them. At the center of it all stood her lead counsel, Christopher Granger, a Harvard law graduate with a face made for courtroom arrogance and a voice trained to distort clarity into confusion. He stood stone cold as the chairman began reading procedural motions. Then he raised one hand with performative calm. "Mr. Chairman," Granger began, "my client respectfully moves to quash the subpoena issued by Representative Jasmine Crockett on the grounds that any testimony she might provide falls under executive privilege and national security constraints as related to her tenure as Attorney General of the state of Florida." Crockett didn't blink. The room buzzed as reporters took notes. Legal analysts watching from monitors leaned forward. The defense was playing the oldest card in the political deck. Hide the truth behind the flag. The chairman glanced at her. "Congresswoman Crockett, response?" She stood slowly, her tone surgical. "Executive privilege doesn't cover the trafficking of minors. And national security shouldn't be used to shield people from accountability when the victims were teenage girls without names, passports, or power." Granger smirked. "With all due respect, your motion is inflammatory." "No," Crockett interrupted. "What's inflammatory is that this government allowed a predator with a private jet to operate for nearly 2 decades while officials like your client helped bury evidence with well-polished smiles." Gasps from the back rows. One of the survivors covered her mouth. Crockett turned to face the public gallery, voice rising. "You want to play semantics? Let's. Because while the legalese gets debated, the survivors remember the carpet color." The sound of the hallway. The voice of the woman who told them to be quiet and grateful. She turned back to Granger. "Isn't it true, Mr. Granger, that Ms. Bondi's office coordinated public responses to the initial Epstein investigation? That she had personal communication with the same donors tied to his foundations?" "No proof of that," he shot back. Crockett smiled coldly. "Not yet. But we're not done." Outside, the hashtag testify Pam was already trending. Inside, Bondi, watching via closed circuit, slid off her earpiece and tossed it across the room. Her perfectly manicured calm was cracking. She reached for her phone and texted one word to a burner contact. Fix. But some things couldn't be fixed, not when the survivors were watching, and certainly not when the fox was being dragged into her own henhouse. Asterisk. The first smear piece dropped before midnight. The hidden agenda of Jasmine Crockett, weaponizing trauma for political gain, screamed the headline across a fringe media site known for laundering reputations and discrediting women who threatened power. Within hours, it spread like poison through online forums and cable panels. Screenshots from Jasmine's old college social media accounts, grainy, out-of-context footage from a campus protest, a deeply personal accusation about her fatherhood. Spent a decade battling addiction before dying clean. Nothing illegal. Nothing relevant. Just enough to raise an eyebrow, cloud a mind, seed a whisper. By morning, is Jasmine Crockett emotionally fit for office? Trended. She read the headline once. Then she closed her laptop. There were no tears, no outbursts, just a quiet, searing anger that sank bone deep. She walked into her office, where her aides already looked rattled. Malik, her chief of staff, approached carefully. They're going after your record. Calling your Epstein hearing a distraction from your own ethics investigation. There is no investigation, she said flatly. I know, but they're manufacturing one. Jasmine nodded. Good, that means they're scared. That afternoon, she entered the oversight chamber in a deep navy suit and blood-red lipstick, the kind of sharp, deliberate shade that refused to apologize. She walked with her back straight, her stride unhurried, as if she were arriving for a coronation, not a confrontation. Granger stood near the bench, waiting like a spider in a courtroom web. Interesting color choice, he smirked. Making a statement? Yes, she replied coolly. That I bleed but I don't flinch. Gasps echoed through the room. Crockett walked directly to the dais, placed a manila folder on the desk, and faced the chairman. For the record, I have no ethics investigation, no conflict of interest, and no apology to offer for pursuing the truth. Granger tried to object, but she raised her hand. I know how this game is played. Discredit the woman, twist her past. Weaponize her family, her voice, her audacity to name what others won't. But I didn't come here to be palatable. I came here to be precise. She opened the folder and held up a photo, a 14-year-old girl, brunette, eyes full of broken trust. Lila, this is who they want you to forget, she said. This is who silence protects. No one moved. Not the chairman, not the press, even Granger couldn't speak. Later, in the hallway, a young woman with trembling hands stopped Jasmine. They tried to ruin me too, she said. Thank you. Wearing red. Jasmine nodded, her voice low. If they paint a target on my back, I'll draw it on my lips. Because in a world built to shame, some colors weren't just style, they were war paint. Asterisk. The chamber lights dimmed as the screen lowered behind the witness table. Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium, remote in hand, her voice level and restrained. The courtroom had been reduced to a whisper. There were no outbursts now, just the kind of dread that made people hold their breath without realizing it. Before we begin, she said, I ask the committee to prepare itself. What you're about to see is not rumor, not speculation, and not politics. It's a matter of record. It's a room. It existed. And it was paid for by someone in this very file. Click. The screen blinked to life. A grainy photo from 2006 low-resolution security cam footage. A narrow hallway. A brass nameplate that read, Guest Lounge, Donors Only. Crockett continued, her tone sharpened by quiet fury. This property, located at 2410 Bayview Terrace, was registered to a shell corporation tied to Jeffrey Epstein's philanthropic front. That shell company received a $200,000 political donation from a Florida-based PAC overseen, in part by the then Attorney General's office. Gasps. She turned, locking eyes with the committee chair. That PAC's top legal consultant at the time was Pamela Jo Bondi. Granger jumped to his feet. Objection, guilt by association. The documents are in the public record. Crockett snapped. She signed the disbursement authorizations. She oversaw legal strategy. regarding coordination with the federal inquiry in 2007, and she was photographed entering the property 4 times between 2006 and 2008. Once on the night 3 girls were flown in from the Dominican Republic and never seen again. She clicked again. Another image, a lavish room. Crystal chandeliers, velvet chairs, a small glass of champagne placed beside a guest log. The survivors call it the Blue Room, Jasmine said. They remember the walls, the way they were told to smile, the way their names were never asked. One survivor in the back row of the public gallery sobbed quietly. The chairman's voice trembled. Congresswoman Crockett, we are not a criminal court. Please limit. This room may not be a court, she cut in, but it is a mirror. And the longer we refuse to look at what it shows, the more complicit we become. She stepped away from the podium and let the screen fade to black. No one clapped. No one spoke. Even Granger didn't object. Because in that moment, the chamber wasn't a theater of politics. It was a sanctuary of ghosts, and the dead had just been named. Pam Bondi's jaw was clenched so tightly it looked like it might shatter. She hadn't touched her water. She hadn't blinked, but now she leaned into the microphone, her voice coated with controlled indignation. I will not be painted as some accessory to crimes I never witnessed, never condoned, and never participated in, she began. What you're doing here, Congresswoman Crockett, is not justice. It's character assassination. Jasmine didn't flinch. Bondi turned to the chairman. Mr. Chairman, this entire line of questioning is a circus. I request that Congresswoman Crockett's time be suspended and that this committee censure her for defamation and emotional manipulation. The chairman shifted in his seat. Ms. Bondi, you were invited here to respond to a subpoena. Congresswoman Crockett's time is protected by House rules. Pam took a breath, then turned back to the room, not to Jasmine, but to the cameras. Her voice dropped, softer now, calculated. You want someone to blame? Blame Epstein? Blame the men he surrounded himself with. Blame the institutions that failed. But don't blame me for walking into a room I didn't know was evil. She paused for dramatic effect. I was attorney general of Florida. My office was flooded with criminal cases. I didn't have time to vet every donor, every handshake, every event. If we start weaponizing assumptions, no public servant is safe. Crockett rose slowly. You didn't know? She asked, stepping toward the table. Correct. You didn't know who Epstein was when you flew on his plane to a Palm Beach fundraiser? I didn't fly on his flight logs. Jasmine cut in, lifting a document. Tail number N212. G. March 12, 2007. You sat 2 rows behind Alan Dershowitz and across from 2 girls who weren't on the manifest. The silence thickened. Bondi faltered, just for a second. But Crockett didn't let up. And when those same girls were found 2 weeks later in Miami, do you recall what your office did? Pam swallowed. We deferred jurisdiction to federal investigators? No, Jasmine said coldly. You overruled your own team. You told prosecutors not to pursue it. I have the emails. Pam's hands began to shake. And still, Jasmine didn't raise her voice. Because she didn't have to. The truth was loud enough now. The committee room had gone silent, so silent that even the fluorescent lights seemed louder than before. Jasmine stood tall now, calm but electric, holding a cream-colored folder embossed with the seal of the United States House of Representatives. This, she began, is the email your office tried to have permanently sealed. Marked confidential attorney correspondence, dated July 18, 2007. Pam. Bondi stiffened. Jasmine opened the folder with the poise of a surgeon. Then she began to read. Subject: Handling of witness testimonies. Jeffrey Epstein from Office of Attorney General Pam Bondi to Chief Investigator Gregory Hawes. Quote, do not proceed with any subpoena of minor victims without express clearance. This office has received communications from legal representatives of Mr. Epstein that indicate significant reputational harm to state officials may result. There is interest in resolving this quietly. Ensure discretion. Keep this out of the press. A murmur rippled through the chamber like the first shockwave before an earthquake. Pam's lips parted. As if to protest, but no sound came, Jasmine kept going, her voice even sharper now. Further, if the federal office insists on continuing, we will officially step back. But do not assist them in any manner beyond the public record. There are optics to manage. By the time she finished, the room had fallen into stunned, breathless silence. Even the Republican members who had previously defended Bondi now sat in frozen disbelief, their eyes darting between each other. Unsure of how to spin what they'd just heard, Pam Bondi looked hollow. Her eyes stared blankly at the desk in front of her, blinking rapidly as if trying to wake from a nightmare. But Jasmine wasn't done. She carefully placed the document down and looked directly at Bondi. "You didn't just look away," she said quietly. "You intervened. You protected a predator. And now you're here trying to rewrite the past like it's a press release." Someone in the back gasped aloud. A woman, mid-30s, hands over her mouth, and then, from the media bench, a flurry of fingers, typing on keyboards, cameras clicking. The moment was spreading. Raw. Unstoppable. Bondi finally found her voice. That email was taken out of context, but Jasmine leaned in, her voice a whisper only the microphone could catch. "No. Context makes that email innocent." And the gavel never came down. Because no one dared interrupt what the whole world was now watching unfold. Pam Bondi's fingers gripped the desk now. Knuckles white, jaw tight. "This is a mischaracterization of internal discussions," she sighed, voice shaking but trying to command authority. Legal offices use cautionary language all the time when navigating federal overlap. "You are spinning this to fit a narrative." But her voice was faltering. Jasmine didn't flinch. She waited, letting the silence hang in the air, as if giving Bondi the rope she was so desperately using to climb out of a hole. But that rope was fraying fast. And then Jasmine calmly reached under her papers. "I expected that response," she said. She pulled out another document, thicker, stapled, marked Exhibit 7B. "This isn't one email, Ms. Bondi, it's a pattern. And the next file proves that it wasn't just passive language. Your office actively obstructed a federal agent." The room stirred again. Pam leaned back ever so slightly. Jasmine read, "To a USA Karen Schaefer from FL Ag Office per instructions from Attorney General Bondi, we will not be turning over sealed victim statements. Your attempts to contact minor Jane Doe number 4 are considered harassment by our office. Our jurisdiction does not endorse media sensationalism under the pretext of federal pursuit." Jasmine's voice slowed on the final line. "We advise that any further engagement with local victims be routed through us, or legal consequences may follow." Gasps again. One Republican congressman audibly muttered, "Jesus." Jasmine set the document down and looked directly at Pam Bondi. Her voice cool, but almost maternal now. The way a teacher scolds a child who thinks they've outsmarted the system. "You weren't protecting Florida's institutions," she said. "You were protecting a man who was paying off powerful people while hurting girls." Pam snapped, "That's not true." But Jasmine cut in, calmly. "I have the victim's statement, Pam. Jane Doe number 4. Would you like me to read her words next?" Pam's mouth opened and closed. And this time, she had nothing. The tension was no longer just inside the room. Social media was exploding. Reporters were exchanging glances, scrambling to confirm the names. People watching the live stream were screen recording and re-uploading to TikTok by the second. Jasmine stacked her papers neatly. Then said the words that hit harder than any accusation. "We don't need your opinion anymore. The facts speak for themselves." And in that moment, even Pam Bondi knew it. She wasn't walking out of this hearing the same way she walked in, for the first time in over an hour. The entire room went dead silent. No side whispers, no shuffling papers. Not even the click of a phone camera. Pam Bondi sat still, the color drained slightly from her face. Her jaw tightened. She glanced to her right to the Republican congressman from Texas, who had given her a nod of support earlier. He didn't meet her eyes. Then she turned left, to the legal aide who had accompanied her into the chamber. Seated, just off-screen, the aide looked down. Pam's eyes flicked across the dais, searching for an ally. A lifeline. A single voice that might jump in and say, "Objection," or "This line of questioning is political theater," or even a simple, "That's enough, Congresswoman Crockett." But no one did, not even the usual protectors, not even the men who had once sat shoulder to shoulder with her at CPAC and on Fox News green rooms. They looked still, trapped in thought. Or guilt, or cowardice. The air felt like glass. Jasmine Crockett leaned in just slightly, not aggressive, not performative. Just enough to send a signal, "You're not in control anymore." She didn't yell, she didn't gloat. She simply said, "Why won't anyone speak for you now?" Bondi blinked. "You had so much support, didn't you?" Jasmine continued softly. "When it was about controlling the narrative, when you could count on sound bites and spin rooms and lobbyists to do the cleanup. A few reporters scribbled faster. A boom mic dipped lower over the center of the desk. But now, in this room," Jasmine said, voice almost whispering, "where it's just the facts, the receipts, and the victims, it's just you." Bondi visibly swallowed. Jasmine turned to the committee chair. "I have no further questions at this time," she said. "But I reserve the right to reopen based on forthcoming disclosures." A chair nodded. Subdued, Pam tried to straighten her posture, tried to summon that old Bondi confidence, the polished Fox composure, the courtroom presence, the spin doctor flair, but her hands were trembling slightly, and the cameras, millions of them, caught it. This was no longer a political skirmish. This was exposure, raw, unprotected. And no one, not even her old friends in high places, were reaching down to pull her back up. Not anymore. The silence was still hanging in the room like fog when Jasmine Crockett turned slowly, deliberately back toward her binder. She didn't rush. Every motion was surgical. With one hand, she flipped open a navy blue folder marked Exhibit E and pulled out a document already circled and annotated in red. Soft rustling of paper echoed like thunder in the quiet chamber. She lifted the document, held it up with one hand, and let the gallery see the heading, "Confidential Flight Manifest Epstein Aviation Holdings." A collective shift rippled through the chamber. Even some of the stone-faced members of Congress adjusted. In their seats, reporters lifted phones. Cameras redoubled their focus. Pam Bondi didn't flinch outwardly, but her right hand twitched, ever so slightly, as if reaching instinctively for a non-existent objection. Jasmine began to read. Date: February 17, 2008. Aircraft tail number N212JE. Destination: Palm Beach to Little St. James. Passenger manifest: Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Alan Dershowitz. Pamela Bondi. A faint gasp, then pen scribbling furiously. Jasmine paused. She let it hang there, like smoke in the lungs. Then continued. Second entry. Date: May 23, 2011. Same. Aircraft. Destination: Teterboro to St. Thomas. Passengers: Epstein, unnamed assistant, Pamela Bondi,